Welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. And if you're watching the replay or on YouTube, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. I appreciate you so much. Today on the podcast, we welcome Lin Eleoff. We're so excited to have her here. She's a lawyer, a former radio and TV journalist, and author of the books Gutsy, Glorious Life Coach and The Dignity Diet. She's a transformational mind, body, and business coach who helps women reconnect with their dignity. She works with lawyers and other high achievers who use food to manage the stress of their busy lives. She shows them that it is possible to stop using food as a buffer for stress. And due to a medical crisis that culminated in an operation to remove her thyroid, she began to see where she lost her dignity in her childhood, and she discovered how to get it back. And she helps women reconnect with their dignity they're born with. Now, during the podcast, we talk about the type of women Lin coaches and how personal coaching can lead to transformation. We talk about reclaiming the dignity we're born with. We discuss feminism and its definition and how it can be different for different women. We discuss connecting the mind with the body and how to listen for clues. We discuss shame and the role responsibility plays in making changes in your life. Now, stay to the end to find out how she suggests you start to listen to your body. And we address so many issues that we ladies in menopause grew up with, the shame, the waiting for permission, and how many of us have a negative voice in our heads and the need to always be thin. Now, at the end of the episode, make sure you visit drmichellegordon.com/podcasts, where you can find the show notes, plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And if you enjoy the episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you're always the first to know when each episode is released. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for all of the 5-star reviews. And if you haven't left a review yet, please take the time to review the podcast, because this helps more women find it to get the help they need during the disruption of menopause. No one should have to go it alone. And thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement. I'm excited to have you here. I'm really excited to bring this podcast, especially with Lin, because she treats some of the same women that I do. And she talks to a lot of women who are high achievers. And so I'm just really excited to have her on the podcast today. So let's get to her. Thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement. Lin, welcome to the Menopause Movement Podcast. I'm so happy that you're here.
I am thrilled to be here, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you serve.
I work with women who want more, and rightfully so. Although oftentimes women don't even want to say that, right? We feel guilty and we feel shame because we want more. We have these thoughts secretly like, am I even allowed to ask for more? Like, shouldn't I be giving more than I'm getting? And so I am working with women, and this is like the most rewarding work I have ever done and they are going through perimenopause, menopause, where now they're like kind of open to the idea, like, damn it, I have a right to want what I want and get what I need, and owning that. So those are the women I work with in various aspects of their life. You can't have, be great, everything great at work, but you're suffering inside with your body. It's all connected, right? So you've got to have all cylinders firing.
So the question I have for you is, let's go back and start a little bit on like, what is your background and where did you start? And, like what do you do now? What did you do before you started helping women, that sort of thing?
Well, my very first career was in radio, television news. I was a journalist on air. Eventually, I was a reporter, an award-winning reporter, actually, if I'm going to toot my own horn there. Never used to do that. And then I became a news anchor. And I did that for a while in a major market in Canada. My husband brought our family here to the States. I live in New England now, so his job brought us here. And I was pregnant with my fourth child. And in our town was a law school. And I wanted to go to law school my whole life, but my career was so great. I couldn't justify leaving a career and going to law school. So after I had my fourth baby, I applied to the one law school in town, got in, became a lawyer, absolutely loved the process of going to law school. It was all because it was all about your mind and thinking and changing the way you think and see things and logic and reasoning and all this stuff that, we don't really understand until it's pointed out to us. And then that took me down the road of, I wanted to start my own business, but I knew that I didn't want, I used to think I wanted my own law firm, saw some girlfriends struggling like crazy with that. So I took it online and I saw all these entrepreneurs with their assets exposed, so to speak. So I started, my very first business was called Cover Your Assets Online. And
wait. Cover your assets
Cover your
online.
assets online.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. And so that was, I identified for entrepreneurs who didn't want to spend a lot of money on a lawyer because they wanted to put it into their business. So I created a DIY legal toolkit. And that got me hooked into being my own boss, having my own business. And then from there, I was working with women who were starting their businesses and coaching them on that. And then it got into personal coaching, which is the most rewarding work that I've done.
Personal coaching.
Yeah, private
So now
coaching.
you do one-on-one coaching.
I do a fair amount of one-on-one coaching. I used to do a lot of group coaching, but I love the one-on-one. It's that connection. That's one of my top values in life. And I realized that as a lawyer, one of the things I loved most was just connecting to people and really listening to them and their stories. And most lawyers don't have time for that, right? But that's what I loved. And that's what made me a good news reporter and journalist. So it kind of all comes full circle.
Yeah, sure. So when you do coaching, you're primarily working with women, right? Do you work with any
Yes.
men?
No.
Okay, so you
Not
only
that
work with
I
women.
don't like, I love men. It's just, but I do work with women. And when I work with women, it affects the men in their lives in
Right.
such a good and positive way. So I guess indirectly, I work with men too.
Yeah, that's interesting because, in my program, we have the Minnow System and the Menopause Movement membership. And what we've seen that happens with the women who go through that is that we see this huge ripple effect that not only, does it affect them, but
Right.
all of these, these changes. And so it sounds like you're doing something similar in your one-on-one work. Big
Yes.
ripple effect.
Absolutely. I wrote a book called The Dignity Diet. And, the word diet I know isn't a very popular word but this isn't a diet. This really, my whole program and system starts with dignity and getting your dignity back and becoming a dignified woman and what that means. And that is so empowering. And so we really learn a lot about ourselves. Like people think, yeah, sure, I have dignity. Sure, I have integrity. When I start to coach them, we work on that. There's a lot to uncover. And oftentimes what I hear is, oh my God, I had no idea I was
Right.
thinking that, or I had no idea that's what it meant. And all of
Yeah.
that, which is so exciting.
I want to get to the story of how you got to reclaiming dignity. Did you have some sort of an experience where you lost your dignity or?
So here's the thing, Michelle, we all lose our dignity after being born with it. Like we are all born fully actualized, worthy human beings that matter. Like, so we are born dignified. And then along comes societal pressures, parents, friends, media, spouses, all that stuff. And it alters or uh, get it screws up the way we think about ourselves,
Okay.
basically, right? So we lose our dignity, and I think it's a rite of passage. I really think that everybody does it, just like we lose our teeth. The only difference is your teeth automatically grow back in, but you don't automatically get your dignity back. And that's where people can go through their whole lives like that and get to the end of their life and feel unfulfilled and never having really met themselves, met their whole selves. And so it's a process. So for me, I think I first lost my dignity, or this is as far back as I can remember. So I was 9 years old, and I was with a little girlfriend of mine, and it was summer, hot, beautiful, sunny day, and we had our bathing suits on, and we were going to spend the day on the beach at the water doing all the stuff that we do. Except on this day, we said to each other, we're not going to eat today. Okay, that's the plan. We're not going to eat today. And we're like, okay, we're not going to eat today. Now, we were two skinny young girls, so sweet and innocent. That was a culmination of diet mentality, the diet culture, watching our mothers go on diets. Our mothers were never overweight, but that was in our
No.
heads. Women aren't supposed to eat. I remember that as a 9-year-old thinking women aren't supposed to eat. And I went for decades like that until I had my fourth baby. I was in my 40s. My thyroid gave out. My body said, no more. We're done with your way of doing things. And there was all the white knuckling it in the world was not gonna keep me from the thing that was so scary, which was getting fat. You can't get fat. You mustn't get fat. You shouldn't get fat. Getting fat was the worst thing. And this is what we heard all around us as young
Sure.
girls. And it's so sad. So that
So
journey
all
brought me
right.
back to myself.
So you had body image issues, it sounds like.
I did.
Yeah, and I had that. My mom put me in ballet when I was little. And
Yeah.
so ballet for me was not empowering. I was bigger than all the other girls. I was really muscular and I wasn't that graceful. So for me, she like put these bands around our waists and I always like felt fat and that carried on until I don't know, a few years ago when I said, screw it, I'm going to accept myself the way I am.
Right.
And then that, that led to kind of all these changes that I was able to make. I lost 50 pounds and I'm still losing. And so when for you, you had this belief that women aren't supposed to eat. And I remember, so we're probably similar in age. So, are you in your 50s now or you're okay. So do you remember those caramel, like these caramel,
AIDS.
eat, yes.
They were called AIDS.
AIDS, yes,
AY.
my mom used to take them.
AYDS. My grandmother
Right.
had them. My aunt
Yes.
had them. My mom had them. And I'm like, oh, they didn't look good. I think I licked one once.
Oh, I ate
Oh,
them.
you
Yeah,
can
and
have them.
yeah, sure. And that's why they all smoked.
Yep,
They all
yep.
smoked
They smoked.
I look back at pictures of my mom from when she was pregnant, with me or my brother, my younger brother or something, and she was so beautiful and so skinny,
Yep.
and she was always dressed up, and I thought, this poor woman who had all of these, because she was born in the 30s, I think, maybe the early 40s, and so she grew up in the 50s and 60s. She got married, she had all of her children in the 60s. And I just remember feeling so sorry for her because if you look at the advertisements from the 50s and the 60s and how, now we're going to talk about, I mean, almost every podcast I talk about the patriarchy, right? And how if you look at the advertisements, how a man is taking his wife and putting her over his knee and spanking her and not, women were never equal. And it wasn't, I mean, really, we're just starting now in, 2017 or so with Me Too to really start to pull into, at least in America, our worth, you know?
Well, and you know what's really interesting too, Michelle? I did this, this poll, and I asked women like just open-ended question. How do you feel about feminism today? Or would you call yourself a feminist? And of course, there were several women who said, hell yeah, and absolutely. And with Me Too, a lot of that changed. But boy, oh boy, there were some women who made it so political and made it mean something that has no, like not in my definition at all. And so there is this divide even between women about what it is that we think each other really wants. And I think
Mhm.
that's where the disconnect is, because I think we do all want the same thing, which is health, wealth, prosperity in a nutshell, love, and to feel loved and feel connected and to be with people that lift us up. Like, who doesn't want that? And to me, that's what defines feminism. And I think that the patriarchy has convinced everyone that not everyone, of course, but that's its message. Like feminism is bad. And
Right.
it's
I
a
mean, you know, if you think about it, there was, you know, the whole movement against the ERA back in the 70s that was led by women. I mean, it was led by women against women, and we were close, but we didn't, and we just haven't revived it. So feminism, I mean, my particular view is that women should be viewed as equal, and we should not have the boot of the man on our neck.
Of course. Of
That's all
course.
I'm
That's
saying. We
it.
should be able to choose our own thing, do our own thing, be viewed as equal, and not, I mean, even now today, you know, women scientists are paid less, doctors are paid less. It's just, and we work more, and we're expected not only to do the work that we do, but then go home and take care of our families on top of that.
Yeah.
How do you work with that, you know, with women who come to you seeking permission, which is something that, you know, obviously we're taught from a very, very early age that we have to ask for permission.
Right. Well, and that's what happens when we lose our dignity because babies don't ask for permission, toddlers
Mhm.
don't ask
Right.
or question, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, should I eat? I mean, that's what dignity is. It's like knowing that what you want and need is what you want and need, and you don't question that. And so it really isn't about me or giving permission or getting permission from anyone else other than yourself and really understanding what that means. And for me, what
Mm.
that means is you will do absolutely anything and everything to take care of yourself, even if it's going even when other people don't agree, even when other people think you've lost your rocker, even when other people think that you're making a ton of mistakes. I mean, one of the things that when as a lawyer who became a coach, when that was one of the things for me, it was like, what kind of lawyer becomes a life coach or a life transformation coach or what's that thing she's doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but to get to that place where it's like, damn it, this is my life, by the way, and this is what I do, and you can have your opinion, and I still love you. That's the key, right? Is to really accept that people won't agree with you and that you can love them anyway and still
Yeah.
skip off and do your own thing.
Yeah, that's actually so true. I mean, you know, what kind of doctor leaves? I mean, I'm a surgeon. I trained as a surgeon,
Yeah,
and who leaves medicine, surgery, which is like the apex of all doctors in a sense. You know, who leaves surgery to go and, you know, help menopausal women?
right.
I mean, and so the question I
You
have for
do.
you now, I do, yeah.
You
I mean,
do.
I left surgery
Yeah.
behind, and so the question I have for you now is, you know, you said something about, you know, not questioning your wants and your needs, but how do you know? How do we know? How do you help women understand what they want is really? I mean, because I may want to, you know, go and kill somebody, but we know that that's not something I can do, right?
Right.
So how do you help women kind of sift through what the, you know, how to listen to what they really want, especially if they're not sure?
Well, I mean, that's a really good point. A lot of women aren't sure because we've been taught to not be sure. We've been taught to not trust ourselves. And for some women, there is such a huge disconnect between what's above the neck and what's below the neck. Like we
Mm,
have our minds and what our minds are thinking, and we think it's possible truth. And then it's what our bodies are telling us, and we pay no attention to that. That was
right.
the huge thing for me to realize that my body had a mind of its own. And my body had been trying to talk to me over the years, and I would have nothing of it. And some women are very, very disconnected. And you'll hear everybody say you have to love yourself the way you are and you have to love your body and all of that. Well, that's really hard for women to do. Even when, by most standards, people looking at that woman would say, she looks perfect to me, right? But in
Right.
her head, there's a disconnect. And I think we need to honor that. I think we need to sit with that. I think we need to stop telling women what to do. You
Mm,
need to love your body. You need to accept the way you are. You shouldn't go on a diet. Real women don't go on diets anymore. All these things only serve to shame women more. And being able to sit with a woman and letting her speak and say everything that's on her mind without my judgment, certainly, and without her judgment, ultimately, then we can finally sift through, like, what is it that she really wants? And oftentimes we don't know because we've been living a lie for so long. We think
Mhm.
this is just the way it is, and it's not.
Yeah. So the question more comes along with, if you're disconnected between your head, right, your mind and your body, how do you help women pay attention to that? How do you learn to listen to your body?
Well, you said it. The answer was in your question. It's paying attention, like starting to really pay attention to what's going on up there, as opposed
Mhm.
to like just looking in the mirror and judging yourself and not really hearing it. It's like that you take it as fact. And a belief is just a thought you've been thinking for decades and decades. And so
Right.
you believe there's something wrong with your body every time you pass by the mirror. And that's just what you do every time you pass by a mirror. But what if one day, now that you're aware, you don't do the same thing when you pass by the mirror? What if on that day, all you do is notice, oh, I was just about to say the meanest thing about my body as I pass by the mirror? And
Yeah.
that is the first step. Just noticing how we are and how we treat ourselves and how we
I th
break our hearts all
Yeah,
the
we
time.
do we not only that, well, we don't keep our promises. We don't
We
keep our
break our
promises to
promises
ourselves,
all
yeah.
the time,
And
right?
it's the easiest person to break a promise to is yourself.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we like to teach is self-integrity. We teach that, we really do help women find self-integrity through our program, the Minnow system. And I'm sure that that's one of the things that you help women with as well when you do your one-on-ones with them. And I think that we don't even think, because I think, and we go back to the patriarchy again, we don't even think about the fact that we're breaking promises to ourselves. Like, I didn't want to eat that, but I ate it
Right,
because it
because
made me
I didn't have
feel good.
control, right?
Right. Or I
Women
did, yeah,
tell it,
didn't have
yeah,
control.
I didn't have control. I can't control myself. I have women
Right.
telling me this all the time, and they almost make a joke out of it because it's so painful to really dig into that belief that I don't have control. Like, to
Yeah.
really say, "I don't have control over food," is shaming. It's
Sure.
self-shame. And so to have someone show you that that just isn't true, it's just a belief that you picked up one day when you were 9 and your girlfriend and
Mhm.
you decided that you're not supposed to eat because if you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Right.
Women who eat are shameful. Those
I
nuts.
mean, that's a really interesting story that you got to tell yourself because of because of the stories that your grandmother and your mother, said, because that whole AIDS thing. And it's so funny because I remember when, AIDS was very popular, the supplement, when the AIDS crisis hit, and they had to change their name or they might have gone out of business.
That's right. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
that. I think they might have gone out of business, even though it was spelled AIDS. I remember
Yeah.
that and thinking,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, when the AIDS crisis hit, I remember thinking, "Oh, no, 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 this is not gonna work."
oh,
So when it comes to shame, what do you think is the best first step? Other than, like, I mean, one of the things that the women that come into my program, almost all of them say, "I can't look at myself in the mirror." And so we work on that and we talk about that. But what do you think is the next best step that someone, who's having a lot of thoughts of shame can take to help herself, to coach herself into more self-acceptance?
well, I think again, it's awareness that I am what this is right now is shame. Like, to
Mm,
really know what that feels like. Most women who experience this will do anything to not feel it. So they'll eat something, they'll go buy something, they'll have another glass of wine, they'll have a second helping of lasagna, whatever it is, they'll do whatever they can do to avoid feeling it. You've
mhm.
got to be able to feel it first and
Sure.
sit with it without buffering with something, whatever that might be. That is not easy to do, but it's necessary to be able to reclaim how you think about yourself and just noticing, wow, all that shame. And it's coming from identifying the thoughts and beliefs behind the shame. And then from there, challenging all those, the paradigm that has
Sure.
kept you stuck.
Yeah, I mean, behavior change starts with a decision. But a decision, I like to tell the women who follow me that if you want to change a behavior, you have to make a decision, and a dream without action, or a goal without action, is just a dream. That's what I say. And so if you want to change the way you look at yourself, then you have to start by accepting where you are, which is hard,
Yeah.
which is
People
hard.
don't want to accept where they are. They want to lose the weight, make the money, repair the relationship, do everything just like that without realizing that, heck, if it took decades to get me here, how am I possibly going to turn this around in a day? So,
Right.
patience really is a big part of this. But more than that, I think it's self acceptance. And again, it's like, this is where I am today. I don't have to stay here. I'll probably stay here unless I course correct something,
Yeah.
but I will stay here if I don't change the foundations and the process that got me here. So, like the old Einstein quote, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 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 sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, for me, and how I was able to make changes. I remember for years, I mean, from, I had gained so much weight, and I was so disgusted with myself. And every time I looked in the mirror, I would just tell myself I was fat. And all I wanted to do was get back to exercise, but I just couldn't find the motivation. I
Mm.
couldn't, didn't have the motivation or the willpower. I mean, I just had so much like negative self-talk that
Yeah.
I was really stuck in what we like to call mental misery. And I just couldn't do it. So I had all these thoughts and I remember specifically, we took my son to a Lady Gaga concert. And I remember, just thinking, God, I'm so fat. I need to start exercising again. And I had an emotional reaction to that, but it still didn't make any difference.
Right, because that
So
was shame, right? The
right,
emotional
right.
reaction was shame.
Yeah.
Right, and
And
you can't from shame do something you're not shame is a lousy motivator. If
it really
anything,
is. Yeah.
it'll make you white knuckle it for a little while.
Right.
I was the opposite of you, Michelle. So I grew up with that fear, like you can't get fat and women don't eat. And then of course I go into an industry,
Oh,
television
yeah.
industry where that is like, oh, how I looked. It didn't matter, that how well I did with my reporting or that I did win awards. None of that really got me any attention. What got me attention was how I looked. And so my value was tied to how I looked. And I thought, come hell or high water, I need to preserve. So I would do punishing exercise. I would like run every single day. I would do all kinds of exercise. So it's just kind of the flip side of what you were doing. We were kind of on the same path, but with different results. But
Sure.
the thing in our heads was, you know, something's off.
Yeah. I
We've
mean,
had enough.
the thing about shame is just, it's a blame turned inward.
Yeah.
It's blame turned inward. And, it's guilt, shame, and blame are all, the same emotion. And what we do with it, we like to not take responsibility for our own behavior, because if it's really my fault that I've gained, 50 pounds, then then I have to actually recognize the fact that it was my behavior change that led me. My behavior led me to that result. And when that's hard to see. So it's easier for me to say, well, I'm going to blame it on my hormones, or I'm going to blame it on my thyroid, or I'm going to blame it on, the fact that I
Menopause,
can't
right. Yeah,
menopause, or I'm not going to, I can't metabolize this or whatever.
right.
And to be fair, menopause does have a role in weight gain. It does. As we lose our hormones, it does have a role.
Absolutely. Yes, it does.
But it's still our behavior. It's
Yeah.
still our behavior. And when we have to, even though, I mean, one of the big complaints is that, I just can't shift the weight. I still exercise, I still eat the same, and I just can't shift the weight. And we see that. I mean, I'm sure you see that in your audience as well. And what we do is we help women understand that, when we start to age, we have to do things a little differently. And that's what we have the podcast for. And
Mhm.
I mean, we have to do things a little bit differently, but we can be effective, and we don't necessarily have to live in that body if we don't want to.
I think what you said about taking responsibility is huge. And I think that, we kind of get that in our heads, but we really don't understand what that means. Like my short form for that is to woman up. I mean, we have to woman up. We have to step into our adult lives, because when we bring our child mind thinking into our adult lives, we end up with a mess, because the way we learn to
Yeah.
think as children, and we bring that into adulthood, because nobody ever tells you when you're 25 or around there that your prefrontal cortex, by the way, is now fully functioning and you can come up with your own thoughts and ideas and beliefs. Nobody ever says that, like blank slate, come up with your own stuff. No, so we bring it all into our adult life and we're still thinking like children with
I
the
mean, I love this point
responsibility.
so much
Yeah,
because I have spent a lot of time over the last few years really looking at every single belief I have, and I mean, you can't all see them all, right? But to see the ones that you can see.
yeah,
And one of my things was that I always responded to anyone that I viewed as authority as a 10-year-old. As I always saw myself as young, immature, and not knowing. And so whenever, and especially the men, and I thought, what the hell is this? I'm an adult. I'm in my 50s now, and why is it that I'm looking at everything as if I'm naive? And I just had this whole naive kind of self-talk that I wasn't worthy, or that I didn't know enough, or that so this was, and I can't be the only one. I mean, just because I grew up in such a strong patriarchal, misogynistic sort of atmosphere that involved some really very serious physical abuse. I just always saw myself as that person, and so it's been really like liberating for me to
it is.
to self coach and to self parent,
Yeah,
and to say, what, it's okay,
it
you
is
are an
okay.
adult, you can make decisions, and it's
Right.
fine, and you can go out, and it's okay to leave surgery and help women in
That's right.
menopause.
And
and
it's
and that
okay
was
to
so freeing for me.
I love it, because here's the
Yeah.
difference. Like when we play cards, now I'm not a card player, but like when you play cards as a kid, you used to, with my kids, I'd play cards and they'd cry because they didn't like the cards they got, because, how you're supposed to win with a bad hand. But the hand
Right.
you get is the hand you have to play. And as an
Exactly.
adult, if your thyroid goes on you, you go through menopause, whatever it is, those are your cards. How are you going
Exactly.
to play? How are you going to play? Because we can just simply say, oh, well, it's menopause, or oh, I'm powerless over food, or oh, the blah, blah, a million different things. I have diabetes. I have this. I have that. Yes. Now, where do we go from here? Because to
Yeah.
simply fall back on that and say, these are the circumstances, I'm powerless over them, is how we don't take responsibility. So you have
Yeah.
to take responsibility for the cards you're dealt. And this is something that, we don't believe, and it just sounds cute to say, but there's a reason why you've got those cards. Like you're supposed to have those cards, because there's something to learn from each and every one of those cards. My thyroid gave out on me. I had to have surgery from it. I learned that's what sent me into the abyss at first.
Sure.
And then I rose up. And
Well,
so
so
from
so let's
there,
just talk for a second about your thyroid. You had a thyroid operation. You have a thyroidectomy,
yep,
or
full
okay?
thyroidectomy.
And did you have a cancer or
No, thank good.
hyperthyroid?
Yep,
You were
hyper.
hyperthyroid,
Yep, Hashimoto's.
but that's hypo.
Yeah,
Hashimoto's is hypo. So what you had hyper Hashimoto's?
I had Hashimoto's. The one
Okay.
where it's hyper is the one where it's overactive,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that one. That's the
Oh,
one.
okay. That's a little bit rarer. And so did you have there's a condition that comes sometimes with hyperthyroidism called thyroid storm, which is really
Mm.
dangerous. So it doesn't sound like you had that. Did your eyes bug out?
No,
All right. So
no.
that's another
Maybe I
thing
got
is
it
that
wrong. Maybe it is hypo. Whatever it was,
yeah,
I had the doctors were going to say my TSH was normal, right? But the
okay.
doctor did a test on me and she like felt my neck and she said, "Hmm." I said, "What do you mean by hmm?" She goes, "Well, let me do a thyroid test." She does a thyroid test, comes back normal, the end. I phone back because this is just how I
Yeah.
am. And I'm like, I'm not satisfied with the hmm, and the test is normal. They said, well, if you want, we will do not a biopsy. It started
An
first with an
ultrasound.
ultrasound,
Yeah.
and then they found the ultrasound showed a few nodules. So from there,
Right.
they went to a biopsy, which was inconclusive. Had I
Okay.
not, had I not fought for myself and stood up for myself to say that's just not a good enough answer, your TSH is normal, and who knows, it wasn't malignant, so I may
Yeah.
have survived with this thyroid the rest of my life, but there was a reason why it was inconclusive, and there's a reason why everything happened the way it is. And so,
Sure.
it's to say now that was a gift. Back then I would have slapped you.
Yeah,
Someone
no, but this
said to
is
me,
this is such a
right?
great story because, there is, you've talked about the importance of self-advocacy when it
Yeah,
comes to working with doctors. That's really important. And the
yeah.
other thing is you've talked a lot about the hindsight window.
Mhm.
And the hindsight window, it's a concept that I learned from Eric Edmeades. And you can look it up on YouTube. It's the hindsight window. He talks about how when something bad happens, something that you perceive as bad, the sooner you can reframe it as the best thing that's ever happened to you, the
Mhm.
sooner you can move on with your life.
Right.
And so here you are saying that, this thyroid crisis led
Yeah.
you to this new life.
Right.
And we talk a lot about, things are just things. Are they good? Are they bad? We don't know. They just are. And the sooner we can say, hey, my house burned down, but here's what's really great
Right.
about that. There's always something good that comes out of a tragedy. And I don't want to minimize loss because loss is really big, especially loss of life. So if don't think that I'm trying to minimize grief, but what I am saying is that every time we have an adverse event, something that we view as adverse, we can reframe that to it being the best thing. And an example for me is this COVID crisis. It has pushed me into being a lot more present. I had to cancel a live event, and so instead of doing the live event, we did a beta course that some women who are listening now went through, and that's been really fantastic just to kind of meet more people and be a part of that. And so there's always a lining that
Yeah.
is good.
That is so true. And it is really about reframing. I mean,
Yeah.
my first reaction with my thyroid was, thanks, body, you've let me down again. Right? Like my body did this to me. And instead, what I learned was that my body had a lot of wisdom and I hadn't been listening. And it finally, was trying to get my attention. And so I think that really understanding that what happens in your mind is really what's real and true. Don't trust what your thoughts are. Don't trust them at all unless they make you feel good. That's what
Mhm.
I always say. Unless what you're thinking actually makes you feel good and positive towards yourself and towards others, then question it up, down, right, and left, because there's probably a flaw in your thinking. There's a flaw in the way you're thinking about something, and that is not serving you, even though you'll want to defend it. But you should see what he's like. He's so mean to me, and all, and my
Yeah.
boss this, and my work that, and we will fight to defend the very thoughts that make us feel horrible.
Yeah, we actually do argue for our limitations all the
Yep.
time because we're stuck inside of a belief. And I like to say that there's one thing I know that is true. And if I take this pin and I drop it, it's going to fall. And it's going to fall every single time
Every
because
single time.
gravity is a law. But what I believe may or may not be a law, right? What I believe is just a belief. Is that really true? And so I like to look at that. And I think that's a really good way of managing anxiety. And we've got a few podcasts about anxiety. When you talk about the wisdom of listening to your body, we're not taught that. There is this connection there. And so how would you tell the women who are, and the men as well, who are listening to the podcast now or watching it on YouTube, how would you tell them that here's how you really start to listen?
Yeah. So I think that, at the risk of sounding woo woo and all that stuff, I mean, we are all energy, right? We are just walking balls of energy. And so your body speaks to you in its language, not like the way your mind speaks in sentences and thoughts and beliefs and logic and your body doesn't speak that way. Your body speaks to you, talks to you by the way it makes you feel. Like what you're feeling is a physical response to what your
Yeah.
mind is doing. And so noticing how you feel in any given moment, instead of just accepting that this is just the way things are, and then asking, like, why? Why am I feeling disappointed? No, but really, why? What beliefs do I have that lead me to the conclusion that disappointment is what I should feel in this moment? So I think that being able to pay attention to the language that our body speaks, it's so subtle, and it forces, when someone has a really quiet voice and you have to lean in to really
Yeah.
hear what they have to say, it's kind of like that. It's like, what are you what are you talking about, body? Like,
Right.
tell me. And then really being willing to sit and wait for an answer. And the answers come, and they don't always make sense, and they don't always have the right timing, and they may not come for 2 weeks or 2 months. But I think being able to trust, like, for me to say to my body or my inner being or myself or my source or whatever you might call it, I need some help. I need some answers. And I'm going to wait for you to tell me. And, people have different beliefs about where those answers may come from, but they do come. But if
Mhm.
you're too busy running marathons or running out the door, or eating when you're not hungry, or going out and socializing constantly, if you're not willing to sit with yourself long enough to hear the answers, then it's never going to happen. And you're just going to say, this is just the way
Yeah.
it
Yeah. I mean, I think I like to tell the ladies who come into my program that every answer that you need is inside you, and you don't
is.
have to look outside of yourself. But that is, we really do start to get to the woo, and I'm okay with woo. Woo is all right with me. And my own journey is that I was raised Catholic, and then I went to the Pentecostals, and then I realized that I had kind of a sexual preference for women, and that didn't work with the Pentecostals, and so I was like, "Well, how do I put this together?" And then because I was rejected by them, I completely rejected all religion, and I was an atheist for a really long time. Then something happened and I came across some training, and I started realizing that God doesn't give a crap about what I do with my body in that sense, and that I just have to listen. And
Yeah.
so it's been a really interesting spiritual journey, and I'm now kind of I'm devotee of Paramahansa Yogananda. I wouldn't say I'm not I haven't initiated in Kriya yet, so I'm not a guru. It's not a guru disciple thing, but I did listen. I've got the lessons, and I went through them, and I meditate, and it's really helped me, because at the end of the day, we, like you said, we are just energy,
Yeah.
and everything. I mean, we talk about, when I had Lindsay Durant on the podcast, we talked about, transformational mindset shifting, and how your future self can actually be sending energy to your present self or your past self to get through something that
Yep.
is
Yeah.
coming. And so time doesn't really exist other than
Time does not
as a
exist in
construct.
that sense,
Yeah, so
right?
so this is getting really woo woo, but
Yeah.
time does not exist except for as a construct for us,
Right.
and the eternal part of us lives outside of time.
Yeah.
And so that is really good. And then I wanted to go back to, this whole thing about listening to your feelings. And one of the things that my mentor, Dr. Sri Kumar Rao, said to me is that if it doesn't make your heart sing,
Right.
then it's time for it to go.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something that's not making your heart sing, then
Yeah.
it's time for it to leave your life. And so that's been, there's still a role of permission though. And so I had to actually give myself permission to say, you went through all this training to become a doctor, to learn surgery, and it's okay to let it go, because it was stuck to a belief that I had when I was 5.
Yeah. And it's still serving you somehow, like maybe
Sure.
not
Yeah.
in a surgical suite, but elsewhere. It's like, I am bringing all my lawyer skills to bear every day. It was like nothing was wasted. Nothing went wrong. I didn't go in
Yeah.
any wrong direction. There's no such thing. And
Right.
so one of the questions I ask myself and what I teach people to ask is, does this or will this dignify me? Is
Mm.
this I'll say, do the dignified thing, So what does that mean? Well, if I eat this extra piece of cake or this piece of cake, I shouldn't eat the cake, cake is off limits and all that stuff, which is just not true. There's two ways to eat cake: in a way that is undignified and a way that is dignified. And so you decide how you are going to eat the cake and whether in this moment you can even eat the cake in a dignified way. Because if you can't, then you've got some more work to do up here. It's not that there's anything wrong with you and your body and that food has this power over you that you simply cannot control. It's none of that. It's
Right.
what you're telling yourself about the cake. If I eat the cake, I'm bad. Cake is forbidden.
It's all
All of
about
these
meaning.
things,
It all comes
right?
back to meaning. Yeah.
Instead, it's like, you know what? Today is my day to have this cake, enjoy every single bite of it, not chase it down with a side of guilt, and then go on and do the next thing that feels dignified, right?
Chase it down. Chase it down with a side of guilt.
Yep.
That is, I mean, how many women are gonna relate to that, and the fact
Yeah.
that, we do something and then we chase it with a side of guilt. So
Yeah.
rather than having a beer chaser, we're having a
Right.
chaser of
A guilt
guilt. I
chaser,
mean,
right?
oh my god, I
And
love
that's
that.
the undignified. So
Yeah,
if you can't do it without the guilt, then you have no business doing it. And I say that respectfully. You have no business doing things that make you feel guilty because it's unkind to yourself. It's
right.
just not kind. It's not dignified. So,
Yeah.
what would feel dignified? And it may be that, not having that cake right now is the dignified thing for me to do. And maybe it will be different tomorrow. But that's how we honor our bodies instead
Yeah.
of just succumbing to this notion that we have no power over anything, really. We have no power over our lives. And that's a scary place to be in.
Yeah, I don't like the idea that we just let life happen to us, and
Yeah.
even, on my Monday morning, I have the Monday mornings with Dr. G on Facebook Live, and every Monday I say, "Listen, we happen to our lives, we happen to our week, and so what are 3 things you're gonna do this week that's gonna move you closer to your goal? You gotta keep in mind your grand vision for your life." And I understand, at the time of this recording, we're still in lockdown from COVID. Some parts are starting to open up. But even with that, we can still, like, set a couple of goals that will move us forward. So, yeah, I just, it's important that we reclaim the dignity that we're born with.
Yes, that
Yeah,
is
I love
that
that.
is behind everything that we do. And when we do that, Michelle, then it's not a question of should I exercise or I don't feel like it. It's you then begin to say, yes, my sweet 6-year-old self that doesn't want to go out and do the exercise because it's boring and whatever. But me as a gutsy ass woman who knows that my body needs exercise, going
Right.
out for that walk is the dignified thing to do. And so that's what we do, whether we like
Yeah.
it or not.
Yeah, that's great. So on that note, where can people find you?
You can find me at lineleoff.com. But since that's hard to spell, gutsygloriousliving.com. That's easy to
Gutsy
Gutsy
glorious living. I
Glorious
love that.
Living. Yeah, that's what I stand for. And you can learn about the dignity diet there and all my philosophy. I also talk about, Michelle, I wanted to tell you that at the age of 9, what I realized when I look back is that I practiced blunt force dieting all those decades. It was
Sure.
traumatic. And so
Yeah.
I called it blunt force dieting. And I tell that whole story on my website too. So that's something that I think women will so be able to relate to. And you can actually find that by going to bluntforcedieting.com.
Oh, we got that. So we got 3 different ways to find you. We've got
Yeah.
bluntforcedieting.com, we've got lineleoff.com, and we have gutsygloriousliving.com. So there's a
Yes.
lot of different places to find her.
You'll find me.
So,
Yeah.
and yeah, no, that's awesome. Lynn, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you. And thanks for being a part of the menopause movement.
Michelle, I love what you're doing. I love your message. I love that you that you pivoted and you followed your heart. So yay, you.
Yeah. Now, if you have questions about the topics covered in this or any other podcast, I invite you to open a conversation with me via email at info@menopausemovement.com or on Facebook Messenger through my Facebook page at Dr. Michelle Gordon. That's DrMichellEllegordon. I also want to invite you to join in our next beta group. Here at the Menopause Movement, we are always trying out new methods of teaching and the best ways to get on top of your menopause symptoms. We regularly run beta test groups where we create a learning experience valued at $2,000, but at no cost to you in exchange for feedback and testimonials. To get notified of our next beta group, simply sign up at beta.menopausemovement.com. And thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement. I appreciate you.